Hello, my microdoses and fellow thinkers. Welcome to Microdose for the Mind. I'm James, broadcasting from my quiet retreat at the bottom of the garden. I invite you to take some time out and join me for my thought and meditation session. This is made for my fellow community members living with chronic illness who find relief through ketamine treatment. However, even if you're not a ketamine patient, this space is still for you. Time to reflect, breathe, and reset. This time isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. So, whether you're lying down or on a quiet walk, this time is just for you. Let's get the most out of it together, and if possible, listen through headphones. Now prepare your space. If you're watching the visuals, go full screen and turn off all notifications. If you're resting, find a comfortable position in a soft light. And if you're walking, ensure you're safe and in a peaceful place. For those in treatment, by now you should be feeling the first gentle waves of the medicine begin to wash over you. Now let's begin with some deep breathing. Imagine yourself in a quiet room. The walls are bare. The shelves are empty. There's nothing here to distract you. Nothing to own. Nothing to lose. Just you, your breath, and your being. Each breath carries away a worry. You don't need to solve anything right now. Just be. Notice how light you feel. Notice how little is needed to feel whole. Today's reflection is, how important are possessions? At the end, does the human being with the most toys win the race? We live in a world that tells us more is better, more clothes, more gadgets, more status. If you have the latest and greatest, that means you are somebody. You've made it. But on reflection, do these things really serve us, or do they weigh us down? There are drawbacks to having lots of material possessions. You can end up attracting the wrong type of people, and one can soon find ourselves in a life of managing and upkeeping of everything you have accumulated. Those with a chronic condition must be careful not to fall into this stressful trap. Indeed, research suggests that cluttered environments can increase stress hormones, disrupt sleep, and impair focus. The concept of minimalism often involves reducing possessions to free up mental and physical space, reducing anxiety and allowing for a focus on more meaningful aspects of life. But what did the great thinkers have to say? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This encapsulates his core belief that contentment comes from within, not from external accumulation of goods. For Epictetus, true wealth isn't measured by material possessions, but by the scarcity of one's wants, a concept he called a few wants. He viewed all external things, including possessions and relationships, as temporary gifts that are not truly our own, but loaned to us by fate. Therefore, the goal is to avoid attachment to them, thereby not being harmed by their inevitable loss or the price of keeping them. Seneca reminded us that life is wasted when spent chasing what one cannot satisfy. Seneca advised that one should not attach happiness or identity to material possessions, as they are fragile and temporary. True happiness comes from limiting desires, focusing on what is essential, and recognizing that true freedom lies in controlling one's inner self, not external circumstances. He also noted the importance of valuing time as the most precious possession and cautioned against the deceptive allure of wealth and consumerism. On New Year's Day, a silver-haired lady called the Peace Pilgrim headed a parade handing out peace messages. It was the beginning of a pilgrimage that would last 18 years. Travelling on foot without food or possessions, and with only the food and shelter offered by well-wishers, she carried her simple yet compelling message throughout the US and Canada. She wrote a book about her spiritual discoveries along the way. She wrote, "Anything you cannot relinquish when it has outlived its usefulness possesses you. And in this materialistic age, a great many of us are possessed by our possessions." She believed in simplicity, so that unnecessary possessions were unnecessary burdens, and that true freedom came from living a simple life. She believed that spiritual impoverishment led people to accumulate material things, but that with spiritual blessings, material possessions became unimportant. Henry David Thoreau showed that simplicity is not deprivation, but liberation. Through his experimental life at Walden Pond, he demonstrated that simplifying one's life by reducing material possessions and distractions leads to a greater sense of freedom and fulfillment, rather than a feeling of loss or want. Thoreau sought to live deliberately by stripping away the clutter of unnecessary luxuries and non-beneficial thoughts to focus on the essentials, which he believed were the keys to inner peace and a richer, more authentic existence. Ultimately, he believed that by living simply, individuals can achieve clarity about their values and experience greater contentment and autonomy, as opposed to the constant pursuit of wealth and possessions. Ask yourself what your possessions truly give you, comfort or chains. Do you own them, or do they own you? For those of you in treatment, your medication should now be in full effect. Let's do some more deep breathing. Epictetus believed that pleasure comes from simplicity, friendship, and inner peace, not from possessions. For Epictetus, the greatest wealth was self-sufficiency, achieved by cultivating simple, natural desires and minimizing complex, unnecessary ones, and he considered the ability to be content with little to be far richer than any accumulation of possessions. The path to happiness is not by acquiring more, but by wanting less. This reduces the dependence on external factors that can undermine well-being. Epictetus valued the community of his friends and the sharing of resources, which contributed to security and happiness. The Buddha taught that wealth and possessions themselves are neither inherently good nor bad, but how they are acquired and used is crucial. Wealth is acceptable if obtained through right livelihood, ethically and honestly, without causing harm or suffering to others. The danger arises from attachment to possessions and the craving for more, not from the possessions themselves. True happiness comes from spiritual understanding and generosity, not from the endless accumulation of wealth. Wealth provides opportunities to be generous, practice compassion, and to help others, which benefits both the giver and receiver. So essentially, Buddhism advocates for a balanced middle path, rather than extreme asceticism or endless accumulation of wealth. It encourages mindful consumption, considering if possessions truly add to happiness and a meaningful life. Jesus said, "Do not store treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, but focus on treasures in heaven." Jesus teaches his followers to focus on spiritual, eternal values, rather than the material wealth that is impermanent and vulnerable to decay. I think when referring to heaven, Jesus was telling us to accumulate riches in our mind. I've often mentioned, I think Jesus in many of his teachings was guiding us all the time on how to live a happy life. The concept of the kingdom of heaven, he often described it as a state of spiritual presence and a way of living on earth characterized by love, joy and peace, which I think can be understood as bringing a heavenly consciousness into the present life. I do think so many are driven away from the teachings of Jesus, either by being damaged by religious institutions, church, or their parents' view of Christianity. They're struggling to look at Jesus as the Son of God. Something doesn't connect with them. And it's a shame, because I don't think it's attractive for many of them to come back and just look at Jesus as a thinker, a great thinker and a teacher, and just really the beautiful message that he had to deliver. Possessions are truly diminished by possession, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote. He suggested that the act of owning something can diminish its value, either because the pursuit of wealth distracts from more important aspects of life, or because the attachment to material goods creates an illusion that further acquisition will bring happiness, leading to a state where one is truly never content. So in essence, our possessions can erode our spiritual or moral growth and true fulfillment. A quote comes to mind: "Every increased possession adds increased anxiety to our lives." That was by American author Randy Alcorn. And I think this is pertinent to us all. With chronic illness, possessions can sometimes feel extremely heavy when you're not functioning on all cylinders. The pressure to prove our worth through productivity or things is exhausting, but perhaps healing begins when we let go, when we realize we are enough, even without the clutter. In my life, before I got sick, I guess in many ways was living the American dream. I had a big job, I had 2 residences, cars, a house with a pool, and all the trappings that go with it. And yet, on some level, I felt very empty. It was too much to manage, especially the sicker I got, and I was working so hard for the facade. The real guy was getting in from work, going straight to bed, sleeping for as long as possible, absolutely wiped, and then dragging himself up, painting a smile on his face and pushing through it. But you can only do that for so long. And I remember one day I was feeling completely overwhelmed. I looked in the mirror and I thought, why am I doing all this? And I made a decision at that point to just start scaling down my life, and I was able to do it. And I have ever since, and the more I've scaled down, the happier I have become. Anyway, let's get back on track. Marcus Aurelius, one of my favorites, he wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It's all within yourself." I think the Stoics time and time again are very clear about this, that wealthy people are wealthy in their minds, true wealthy people. As part of my job, I guess I spent a lot of time with people who are worth an awful lot of money. And I have to say, some of them have, in terms of the feeling I got from them, the emptiest people that I've ever met. And it's really curious. Someone can be surrounded by so much, and you look at them and it really is like people become trapped in this gilded cage, and then they can't bear the thought of unloading of these possessions or the people or the way that they live. Because why? Because of what people will think. And therefore you are working and you're making sacrifices for what people think, which ultimately the Stoics knew was a fool's errand. The preoccupation with possessions, more than anything else, is the thing that prevents us from living freely and nobly. That was by Bertrand Russell. Ophelia dug this out for me. It's a lovely poem and I think it's very apt. The weight of things is heavy, yet silence carries light. We measure life in objects, but we miss the stars at night. What's needed is so little: a breath, a hand, a friend. The riches of less remind us we always had enough. Amen. So, my microdoses and thinkers, we're coming to the end of our journey. So does the human at the end of life with the most toys win? Across centuries and cultures, wisdom returns to the same truth. The quiet riches of less. I don't think there's anything wrong with having things that add to our happiness, but I think it's important that we don't see them as symbols to tell others in life we've done well. The possession must bring you, yourself, joy. I think of Robert Cook, who said, "It all depends on whether you have things or they have you." Our most valuable possessions are those that can be shared without lessening those which, when shared, multiply. Our least valuable possessions, on the other hand, are those which, when divided, are diminished. I think the key is finding the balance between having enough and controlling the human desire to want more. Indeed, I believe the happiest people in life have enough, but not too much. In the coming week, I want you to look at the things in your life and ask yourself, does this serve me or bind me? And remember, you are not measured by what you own, but how deeply you live. And if you want to feel rich, just count all the things you have that money can't buy. Love, time, health. While money can help solve problems, it cannot replace those core assets of prioritizing them through conscious investment in physical, mental, and emotional well-being, which leads to a richer, more balanced life. On our next episode, I think we'll reflect on gratitude and how, sometimes when we're struggling, it's very challenging to be thankful, but one could argue it's crucial for our recovery or the maintenance of good mental health. Now, I want you to come back into the body. Slowly open your eyes. Take a big, deep breath. Do a full body stretch. Arms high. Point your toes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is James at the bottom of the garden, signing off. Peace, love, hope, and perseverance. Thanks for joining me today. Obviously, I'm a young channel, and a like, a subscribe, or just a note of encouragement would be gratefully received. Thank you, and I look forward to you joining me next week.